Hey traders, investors, anybody that's new to the channel, what's going on? In this video, I'm going to be talking about why I have a long bias on silver, ticker symbol XAGUSD, why I am going to be looking to go long essentially for quite a while. I'm going to be going over certain charts like the US government. We're going to be looking at government bonds, the money supply, and inflation rates, and I'm going to basically be breaking down why I think that silver and gold too. I just specifically like silver and think it's going to offer better returns. I think that it's going to rise in the long term. I'm not saying that it's going to be going straight up, but basically in this video we're going to be breaking down why I think that. We're going to be looking at technical analysis as well as fundamental analysis. And yeah, we're just going to break everything down. So if you're new to the channel, I plan on doing more silver specific trading videos. I also do other trading videos for the Forex markets. So if you want, leave a like, subscribe, and stay tuned. I'd really appreciate all the support. So anyways, we'll get right into it. So silver. If anybody knows, silver used to be money, or silver is money. It's not currency because money has store of value. So silver silver and gold can be looked at as an inflation hedge. They're not risk free, but they're a little less risk than certain currencies because they actually have a store of value. They're actually something. You can actually do something with silver and gold. So that is why I think with all of the inflation and all the governments printing all this money, I think that silver and gold are going to be a good hedge and that they are going to rise. Regarding the US dollar today is not doing too bad, but as you can see, we're coming up to an area where sellers have clearly been selling. We got one right there. Oh, sorry. We had the original little supply zone, try to come back there, couldn't make it up, and then the third time I thought maybe we were gonna have a pullback up to here, never got it, and we're coming up here again, but now we are forming kind of like a pretty good base, I would say. I think that this as like a base is not too bad. Two engulfing candles there, so I do see us pushing up in the dollar and maybe getting probably a nice pullback in silver. I went long in this area. I can actually break down the trade. I talked about it in one of my other videos, but let me do that. So I had this demand zone here, very strong move away. I'll just sync this, and then I was going to take this zone as well, but I just so happened to turn on my iPad at the time, and I noticed that price was right around here, so I quickly placed an order. It tagged me in perfectly. My stop loss was below all of this, though, so like my risk reward wasn't that great, but it was a winning trade. I closed out the rest of it today, and I just didn't want to hold it over the weekend because like I said, I'm looking at the dollar. And I think that price is going to be moving up. We're forming pretty nice basing here. I think we're going to break this area and possibly move higher. So that's why I closed out my position today. And I'm happy with it. But, the reason that this video I'm going to be explaining why I have that long-term long bias on silver. And it all starts with bonds. I'm not super educated on government bonds, and I am recently just learning about all this, but it's the US 10-year bond. It yields you 0.63%, as you can see here, or 0.64 rather. That's your return on investment per year. And then the US 30-year bond is 1.37% return. And these bonds, the reason that people buy them, countries buy them and investors buy them, is because they're considered like a safe asset, right? It's like, I'm gonna get my yield, I'm gonna get my return. It's safe. It's the USA. They're the biggest country. World reserve currency. So it makes sense, or it did make sense, and apparently it still does make sense to them. But in reality, if you're only getting a 0.63% return or a 1.3% return, and the inflation right now, I can literally make a whole other video about how the way that they measure inflation is completely flawed. The way they measure inflation now, before the Federal Reserve was created, I think that around then, yeah, the way the definition of inflation was simply like inflating the money supply. That is inflation, and what you get in return is rising prices because you've created more money and there's more money out there to bid up prices. And so the government has changed the definition of inflation to rising prices, so that they can essentially just blame inflation on, like, oh, these companies just raise their prices for whatever reason. That's inflation. But in reality, inflation is simply the increasing the money supply, which is what the government has been doing for a long time. As you can see, it really started to pick up after 2008. Huge increases, and now here we are over here. And if you look at the last 5 years, it kind of shows more of what we've been going through in 2020 and this massive expansion in the money supply. And I suggest learning about this because the more money they create, the more money they end up having to create, because they create the money and then the Federal Reserve buys the government bonds, like we were talking about here, and it inflates it all, and like it keeps the whole market afloat by printing money. So essentially, the whole market relies on the Federal Reserve printing money, because why would you buy these bonds? Inflation, and that's kind of where I kind of went off on a tangent here, but the inflation is higher than 1%. Most people know that. There's no way that prices of things are only going up 1% a year, right, or whatever the government tells you. I've seen videos and I've read articles about how it's really more like 5 to 7% per year. But with the expansion of the money supply this much since the start of 2020, I think that it is going to get even worse, which is why I think precious metals, especially silver and gold, are going to rise and in value and be an inflation hedge as the dollar comes down. That's my opinion. And the reason is because I think that the people who are looking for safe assets, the governments, the investors, the pension funds, they all want safe investments, right? And usually those have been bonds. But with a return of 0.6, with a yield of 0.64 or 1.37 for the U.S. 30-year bond, and the consideration of inflation, the rates of return are essentially negative. And I don't know about you, but if I'm going to put my money somewhere, I kind of want it to grow. I don't really want it to lose money. So the idea behind the silver trade and why I'm long is that I think that governments, investors, pension funds are going to start pulling their money out of bonds and putting them into things that are known to work, like gold and silver, which are more safe investments. Sure, they don't produce like a dividend, and I get that, but it's gold and silver. Like, yeah, they don't really like produce anything, right? But it's the idea, like, it's just a form of currency, and that's why I don't really understand why the Japanese yen is considered a safe haven currency, and like investors like to buy it because it's safe. I don't know why, but investors like to find things that are safe, and I personally think that gold and silver are the safest, and that is why I am long biased on gold and silver. And so we're gonna look at the chart here a little bit. We do have this supply area here. Clearly, sellers have stepped up here with this massive red candle. I remember that day. That was a big day. That was a 14% loss or 14% pullback, and that's when I bought the dip. And it was nice. I even bought some physical silver down around here. I don't really remember exactly where, because it was in Canadian dollars as well. So that was nice. I do believe that we're going to have an even bigger pullback. I don't think we're going to get down to these levels, but I could see us getting to this area again, maybe bouncing off here again. We'll have to see. But that's the supply I see now in the daily chart. If you want to look at a weekly, you're going to have some supply up here. it's going to have a hard time. This isn't going to just skyrocket, guys. So I'm not saying I'm going to be long and just hold my positions the whole time, but I do have a long bias. I don't really plan on shorting silver. Maybe if I see the weakness and I see the strength in the US dollar, maybe I will short it a little bit. Maybe if price does break above the supply area and breaks that, maybe it wouldn't be a bad idea to look to go short on silver. But yeah, so essentially I'm going to be looking for daily supply and demand levels inside of them and trying to redefine my entry. Like I said, I'm long-term bullish, but I'm going to be trying to day trade them and trade it as much as I can, because I do think there's going to be a lot of demand stepping in. Even the online website that I buy my silver from, usually they're pretty fast. Usually I place the order and it's here within that same week, and my order wasn't here, never got it, never received a call, so I ended up calling them, and they apologized and said there's just so much demand that they can't even keep up right now. So that's a good sign too. So I think that the demand is only going to increase, and I still think that it's early to be getting into silver long term. I know that we've seen it's been on a tear, and we're supposed to buy low, sell high, but honestly, I just see this rising. I could be wrong, but that's kind of my thought process here, and it really all starts with the fundamental analysis, and then I work over to the supply and demand zones and the technical analysis. But it all starts with just assessing the United States money supply, inflation, and the government bonds, just looking at all of those and being like, why would I personally would not be putting my money in any of these, so I don't know why anybody else would. The only people that are buying these bonds is the Federal Reserve, and American citizens are going to have to pay the price for that through inflation. So anyways, guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you liked it, leave a thumbs up, and stay tuned Sunday for the weekly Forex forecast. Take care.